Hello guys and welcome to another Tokyo Revengers video. And in this video I will be talking about the character Shinichiro Sano from Tokyo Revengers. And this video is going to contain manga spoilers from Tokyo Revengers. And in this video I will be explaining why Shinichiro is the most influential character in Tokyo Revengers, and I will also be explaining the story of his life. So Shinichiro Sano is the former leader of the first generation of the Black Dragons gang. And Shinichiro is also the person who created the Black Dragons gang, and he is the most famous delinquent in the story of Tokyo Revengers. And Shinichiro is famously known as the man who was able to conquer the entire nation of Japan, and his career as a delinquent has inspired many people. And the people who were inspired by Shinichiro would become very powerful in the future, and the list includes guys like Izana Kurokawa, Manjiro Sano, Takemichi Hanagaki, Inupi, and Baji. And Shinichiro is the older brother of Manjiro Sano and Emma Sano. And Shinichiro is also the son of Makoto Sano and Sakurako Sano. Shinichiro was raised by his grandfather, and while he was growing up he lived at his grandfather's house. And the reason why Shinichiro was raised by his grandfather is because his father died in a car accident when he was 13 years old, and his mother died when he was a teenager. When he was a child, Shinichiro would always spend time with Takemichi Akashi, and they have been best friends ever since they were children. And while they were growing up together, Takemichi described Shinichiro as a very special person, and Shinichiro had a mysterious charm that attracted people to him. And even though he possessed this charismatic charm, Shinichiro never resorted to violence, and he was always very earnest and kind. And Takemichi said that Shinichiro was a crybaby, and he never picked fights with people who were weaker than him. And Shinichiro was called the Weak King by his friends because he was not a strong fighter. However, he had a very charismatic personality that attracted people to him, and even people who fought against him ended up taking a liking to him. And this is how Shinichiro ended up meeting Wakasa and Benkei. Before meeting Shinichiro, Wakasa and Benkei both led their own gangs, and the whole Kanto region of Japan was split between these two gangs. These two gangs were sworn enemies, and they feuded aggressively. However, Shinichiro was able to combine these two teams together, and he convinced these two gangs to unite under him. Wakasa and Benkei both took a liking to Shinichiro, and after fighting against Shinichiro they all became very close friends. And one day Shinichiro got Wakasa, Benkei, and Takemichi together, and he told them that he wanted to create a gang. And these four founding members would go on to create the Black Dragons gang. And the first generation of Black Dragons would eventually go on to rule the entire nation of Japan, and at the height of their power they were the strongest gang in the whole country. However, after becoming the #1 gang in Japan, Shinichiro decided to disband the Black Dragons, because he didn't want to fight against people who were weaker than him. And before the disbandment ceremony of the Black Dragons, we saw that Shinichiro was riding on his motorcycle with all the Black Dragons members, and Shinichiro was riding at the front of the pack. And at the disbandment ceremony of the Black Dragons, we saw that Shinichiro was standing in front of all the members of the Black Dragons, and while he was announcing the disbandment of the Black Dragons, we saw that he was crying. And after the disbandment of the Black Dragons, Shinichiro opened his own bike shop, and Shinichiro became a mechanic at this bike shop. And this bike shop is called SS Motors, and Shinichiro really enjoys spending time with his friends at this bike shop. And during Mikey's flashback we learned that Shinichiro is the person who raised Mikey and Emma, and Shinichiro was forced to play the role of a father at a very young age. And when they were children Emma and Mikey would always follow Shinichiro, and Shinichiro would teach them many things. And during the backstory of Emma, we got to see the moment where Emma started living at Shinichiro's grandfather's house, and in this moment Shinichiro's grandfather told everyone that they will all become siblings. And Shinichiro tried to cheer up Emma by telling her that he is going to take her someplace fun, and he also told her not to fall for his good looks. However, Emma replied to this by telling Shinichiro that his hair looks goofy, and in this moment Mikey started laughing at Shinichiro. And Mikey said that Emma has a weird name, and after being disciplined by his grandfather we saw that Shinichiro started laughing at Mikey, and he told Mikey that he doesn't understand girls at all. And during this flashback we also saw that Shinichiro was complimenting Baji's fighting skills. However, after Baji got excited we saw that Shinichiro told him to keep it down. However, after being spotted by his grandfather, Shinichiro started running away, and his grandfather was saying that Shinichiro never comes to the dojo. And during this flashback we also saw that Shinichiro was worrying about Emma, and he was saying that it feels like she is just pretending that everything is normal, and Shinichiro also said that he wants to make her smile. And we also got to see Shinichiro in these illustrations that were drawn by the author of Tokyo Revengers, and we can see that Shinichiro is taking care of Emma and Mikey. And in this next illustration we see that Mikey is still a baby, and in this moment Shinichiro is holding Mikey. And during the backstory of Mikey, we got to see the death of Shinichiro's mother, and after witnessing the death of his mother we saw that Shinichiro was crying, and he was breaking down into tears. And during Izana's flashback we learned that Shinichiro has a very strong connection with Izana, and after showing up at the orphanage Shinichiro told Izana that he is his older brother. And Shinichiro taught Izana many things, like how to ride motorcycles, how to fight, how to dress, and how to style his hair, and Shinichiro is also the person who taught Izana the ways of a delinquent. And Izana was abandoned by his parents, and Shinichiro is the one who taught him everything that he knows, and he even taught Izana how to smile again. While Izana was growing up he always admired Shinichiro, however when Izana found out that Shinichiro is not his real brother, Izana got into a fight with Shinichiro, and this ruined their relationship. And during one of Mikey's flashbacks we saw that Shinichiro was hanging out with Mikey, and in this scene Shinichiro asked Mikey what he would think if he had another older brother. And while he was eating his food Mikey took a minute to think about the question, and then Mikey just responded to this by saying, "I am sure that I will like him." And during Izana's flashback we also saw that Shinichiro was sitting next to Inupi, and we know that Inupi would hang out at Shinichiro's bike shop. So that is all we know about Shinichiro from the second timeline of Tokyo Revengers. However in the original timeline, Shinichiro's life was a lot more different. And during the final battle we got a massive reveal, and this reveal is that Shinichiro is actually a time leaper. And Mikey told Takemichi that his dark impulse was born out of Shinichiro's love, and Mikey also said that Shinichiro turned back time in order to save him. So the original timeline starts off by showing us that Shinichiro just disbanded the Black Dragon's gang, and after the disbandment ceremony Shinichiro went to go visit his father's grave. And Shinichiro was talking to his father, and Shinichiro said that Mikey is a much bigger person than he is, and he also said that he will raise him to become someone amazing. And then Shinichiro told his father that he will raise Mikey and Emma in his place. And while he was walking back home, Shinichiro decided to get a gift for Mikey, and he decided to buy Mikey a toy plane, and he also decided to buy Emma a teddy bear. And 1 month later, Shinichiro just got done working at his bike shop, and after getting off work Shinichiro suddenly got a call from his grandfather. And in this phone call Shinichiro learned that Mikey is in a coma, and he has no chance of getting better. And after getting back home, we saw that Shinichiro smashed the toy plane by throwing it on the ground, and then Shinichiro started stomping on the toy plane, and Shinichiro broke the toy plane into little pieces. And then 4 years later, we see that Shinichiro is pushing Mikey on a wheelchair, and we learn that Shinichiro has been taking care of Mikey for 4 whole years. And during this time Shinichiro has been working at the hospital while studying to become a nurse at the same exact time, and his life is so difficult that he doesn't even have time to sleep. And then a few years later, we see that Shinichiro is driving with Baji, and Shinichiro told Baji that Sanzu has been released after being locked up for a whole entire year. And after having a conversation with Baji, we saw that Shinichiro went to pick up Sanzu, and after arriving at the juvenile detention center Shinichiro met up with Sanzu. And then Shinichiro took Sanzu to go see Mikey, however after seeing Mikey's condition Sanzu started crying, and he said that this is not Mikey anymore. And during this time Shinichiro's grandfather passed away, and his younger sister Emma ran away from home. And 1 month later, we saw that Mikey passed away, and after witnessing the death of his younger brother we saw that Shinichiro completely snapped. And in this scene Shinichiro was breaking down into tears, and he was also punching holes in the wall at the same exact time. And from the look on his face, we can see that Shinichiro is so heartbroken, and he has foam coming out of his mouth. And after the death of Mikey, we saw that Shinichiro went to go talk to Wakasa, and Shinichiro told Wakasa about everything that happened in the past 4 years of his life. And Wakasa invited Shinichiro to join his gang, and Wakasa told Shinichiro that they would be the strongest gang in the whole country. And then Shinichiro went drinking at Wakasa's bar, and during this time Shinichiro overheard some delinquents telling a story about a time leaper, and Shinichiro asked them to tell him more about it. And this group of delinquents got very angry at Shinichiro. However, Shinichiro was easily able to defeat the group of delinquents, and he defeated them all by himself. And after defeating the delinquents, Shinichiro asked them to tell him where the Time Leaper is. And after finding the Time Leaper, Shinichiro started questioning the old man, and in this moment he was asking the old man if he is really the Time Leaper. And Wakasa started asking Shinichiro what is wrong with him, and he also asked him if he is even listening. However, Shinichiro angrily responded to this by telling him to shut up. And after Wakasa left the scene, Shinichiro told the old man that he needs the time-leaping power in order to save his brother. However, the old man laughed at Shinichiro's goal to save Mikey, and then he told Shinichiro that he got these powers by killing the person in front of him. And in this moment Shinichiro suddenly picked up a metal pipe, and while he was picking up the metal pipe Shinichiro was glaring at the Time Leaper. And during this time Shinichiro was so desperate to save Mikey that he started attacking the Time Leaper, and we saw that he was charging at the old man. And then Shinichiro started swinging the metal pipe at the old man, and he hit the old man in the back of the head with this metal pipe. And after being hit in the head, the Time Leaper was laying in a pool of his own blood, and in this moment Shinichiro was attacking the Time Leaper, and he was repeatedly hitting him in the head with this metal pipe. And in this moment the Time Leaper put a curse on Shinichiro, and this curse is also known as Mikey's Dark Impulses. After killing the old man, Shinichiro tried to go back to the past, however after realizing that his last hope is not working, Shinichiro started freaking out. And then one day later, we saw that Shinichiro went to a bridge, and in this scene we can see that he is standing on top of the railing. And in this scene the author was showing us that Shinichiro was extremely depressed. However, right when Shinichiro was getting ready to kill himself, Sanzu suddenly entered the scene, and he told Shinichiro to get down from there. However, Shinichiro just replied to this by saying that today is the anniversary of Mikey's accident, and Shinichiro also said that he desperately wants to go back to that day. And then Shinichiro decided to commit suicide by jumping off of the bridge, and in this moment he was diving right into the water. And the next scene shows us that Shinichiro is about to land in the water, and from the look on his face we can tell that he has prepared himself for death. And while he was sinking down into the water, Shinichiro was thinking to himself that he can finally be at ease. And while he was drowning in the water, Shinichiro suddenly noticed that something strange is happening, and in this crazy moment we saw that Shinichiro's time-leaping power suddenly got activated. And Shinichiro suddenly noticed that his body teleported back to the past, and when he regained consciousness he noticed that Mikey was right in front of his very eyes. And Shinichiro saw that Mikey was playing with his toy airplane. And in this wholesome moment Shinichiro immediately started hugging his younger brother, and while he was hugging Mikey, Shinichiro was just breaking down into tears. In the previous timeline Shinichiro never got to teach Mikey how to ride a motorcycle, and so because of this, Shinichiro is taking the opportunity to have this experience with his younger brother. And when Shinichiro got back home from his bike ride, he immediately ran inside the house to see his family, and when Shinichiro saw that his family is alive he became very emotional, and he also started crying. However, while he was helping them clean, Shinichiro suddenly heard someone yelling at Mikey, and after hearing the commotion, Shinichiro realized that Mikey just attacked Sanzu. And after this incident, we saw that Shinichiro went to go speak to Mikey, and he asked Mikey why he would attack Sanzu for no reason. And Mikey just replied to this by telling Shinichiro that he has no idea what just happened, and Mikey also said that he is very sorry. And after Mikey apologized to Sanzu, we saw that Sanzu shook hands with Shinichiro, and in this moment Shinichiro's time-leaping powers suddenly got activated. And when he arrived in the future, Shinichiro found out that Mikey is still alive, and in this moment he was so relieved that he started breaking down into tears. And Shinichiro was thinking to himself that he successfully changed destiny by leaping through time. And after getting his bike fixed by Shinichiro, Mikey leaves, and after Mikey leaves, we see that Sanzu arrives at Shinichiro's bike shop. And Sanzu then reveals to Shinichiro that he has two different memories, and he still remembers everything from the original timeline. And then Shinichiro told Sanzu about his time-leaping power, and he explained that he traveled back in time in order to save Mikey. In this chapter Shinichiro even told Sanzu about how he murdered the homeless man, and he also trusted Sanzu with the secret of how he acquired his time-leaping powers. And an important detail from this chapter is that Sanzu called Shinichiro Nisan, and in Japanese this translates to older brother. And this dialogue is showing us that Sanzu sees Shinichiro as his older brother, and these two characters have a very strong brotherly bond. And in this flashback Shinichiro also saved Takemichi from some bullies, and in this moment Shinichiro also gave Takemichi his time-leaping powers, and he also inspired him. This scene showed us that Shinichiro reached out his hand to Takemichi, and he told him that when all else fails, he can use this power if there is someone who he really wants to protect. And in this moment Shinichiro transferred his time-leaping powers to Takemichi. However, after returning to his bike shop, we saw that Shinichiro realized that two people broke into his bike shop, and this altercation resulted in Kazutora being controlled by the curse, and this caused him to kill Shinichiro. And after being hit in the head by Kazutora, we saw that Shinichiro was bleeding out on the floor, and he was laying in a pool of his own blood. And in the final timeline of Tokyo Revengers we saw that Shinichiro was revived after Takemichi and Mikey time traveled back to the past, and when this timeline was first created we saw that Shinichiro was still a teenager. And the first time we saw Shinichiro is when he came out of the house, and in this scene Shinichiro was patting his younger sister on the head, and he was also smoking a cigarette. And then Shinichiro, Emma, Baji, and Sanzu were all staring at Takemichi, and they were wondering who he is. And in this moment we saw that they were all standing together. And a few years later, we saw that Shinichiro gave Mikey a motorcycle as a birthday present, and in this moment we saw that Shinichiro looked very happy. In this final timeline Shinichiro is living a very happy life with his family, and we see that he is still being a supportive older brother to his two siblings. And in the final chapter of Tokyo Revengers we saw that Shinichiro was attending Takemichi's wedding, and in this final timeline we learn that Shinichiro is still the owner of a motorcycle shop, and Inupi is also working at Shinichiro's bike shop. And at the end of the wedding ceremony we saw that Shinichiro was standing with Mikey, Emma, and Draken, and we saw that he was having a good time. Anyway guys, if you guys enjoyed this video, and want to see more like it, then like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for watching.